Thank you. Welcome to the Finance Committee. Today is Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:34 and with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to
and
the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, with
indivisible,
and justice
liberty, and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 20. And on June 16, 2021, the Governor Baker signed an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This meeting is being recorded. Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's good to see everyone's faces. Everyone's cameras are on. And so hello, everyone. Good to see and good to see everyone. I wanted to just start off the meeting, if I may, with just a quick announcement. One of our Finance Committee members, Tracy Priestner, who has been on the Finance Committee for 13 years and has served us very well as the town, has resigned from the committee effective today. And I just want to thank her for all her efforts of her 13 years on the committee. And she has certainly done a tremendous job being dedicated to the committee and has been the school liaison for us, which is a big budget, big task. And so I'd like to thank Tracy for everything she's done for the town. And we wish her well.
Yes, thank you, Tracy.
Absolutely.
So thank you. So I'd like to proceed on with the first item of our agenda tonight, which is committee updates and liaison reports. Not sure if anybody has any topics to go over tonight.
Well, we had an audit committee meeting last evening. This was really the second and final one to discuss the topics in the management letter that was provided. Now, this was for the 2021 audit. They have not begun yet for 2022, obviously. So for the 2021 audit, we had Tony Roselli on the line last night. And he was quite pleased that for the first time in several years, there were no material issues that had to be disclosed in the management letter this year. And there were just some, minor ongoing things. We had previously met with the treasurer collector on some of those items, and they primarily dealt with things like tailings, tax title, things that are ongoing and are being dealt with. Last night, Nicole was present at the meeting as well. Went through some accounting items that needed to be addressed and corrected, none of which were significant at all. And Nicole has been on top of those issues as well. So it was a very productive meeting, very good meeting with nothing but a lot of much better news than we had heard in the past. So it was great. Tony felt that although our reserves could be a little bit higher, we're probably, our bond rating is AA3, which is, on the precipice of going down to a single A rating. If our reserves were a little bit higher, we would probably have that a little bit more secure. We run the risk of getting a downgrade because our reserves are not very high, but our pension and OPEB percentages are very good. The pension obligation is dictated to us by Bristol County. So that's at roughly 65%, which is a very good number, considering how many states and many local issuers have much lower ratings. even our OPEB rating, which our OPEB percentage as of last year, which was 16%, was well above the state average overall, which is closer to 12%. So as much as we think that perhaps we've got an OPEB problem, we're in a better position than most in the Commonwealth. So I'm not suggesting at all that we, stop contributing to that, but we certainly don't have as big of a monkey in our backs with OPEB as we do with some other things. A stabilization fund combined with free cash is relatively low. It's at about 7% combined. Not a bad number. It should be closer to 10%. Not a bad number, but not a great number. But so overall, the audit was good. And we'll look forward to next year. He's anticipating that he would be coming in perhaps sometime around January. So that was audit committee.
Great. Cindy, I think Hugh, you have your hand up. Thank you, Cindy, for that update. That's great news.
I want to make a couple of comments. One is, and it's a year out of date, but remember the market has its ups and downs.
Right.
Down at the moment. So that was last year. That's not relevant. But if it were June 30 of this year, it would not be relevant probably of what the current values are. But the
Right,
other
which would be relative to other communities.
we'll find out. That's
Right.
next year.
Right.
The other one is pointed simply a caution in talking about the tax title issues. I found on other aspects that Massachusetts law is horrible on that subject. You've probably seen these things in the papers periodically, but if someone underpays the tax by anything, let's make it arbitrarily $1,000, and a $300,000 house, we'll say the town takes the tax title and can sell the house and keep all the proceeds. Now, we're not going to do it, and I'm not suggesting that anybody has it in mind, but I think that's something to keep in the back of your mind that if we get into some tax titles, make sure that turns out not to be the approach.
Is it subject to
what hasn't been changed yet?
Is it subject to a mortgage though? I mean, does the bank
On
come in
mortgage comes
second?
first, but I'm talking about the equity of the owner.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So just a comment.
Thank you. Well, before you go on to the next committee, Cindy, so congratulations, Nicole. Good job. I think your department and the accounting office and the treasurer's office have made a remarkable improvement over the number of years. So congratulations for being part of that. So great job.
She's on mute, but oh, there she is. Yeah, Nicole has done a great job. I mean, Tony, pointed out that, the transition was difficult for everyone, given that in 21 we combined the treasurer collector's office for the first time. We had a new town accountant. So those types of things all together at one time made it for a difficult transition, but both she and Sue got through it. They worked very well together, and he was very pleased with the way the transition ended up.
I just wanted to say thank you.
Yep.
For all your help and support over the past year. Yeah, it's been a challenge, but we're moving on. I'm finalizing my balance sheet. I've already started putting some items in for the tax recap. We're planning on classification December 5th. So everything's moving along. I'm hoping to have free cash certified by then or shortly thereafter. So getting there.
Oh, you didn't let Gary ask the question.
That's exactly what I told Nicole last night. I said, when is free cash? I said, because that's going to be Gary's first question is, Nicole, do we have free cash yet?
Thanks, Nicole. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So Cindy, did you have any other committee updates that you wanted
Yeah, the campground committee met out at the property actually maybe about 3 weeks ago. That's still in the very early stages. There was actually a possibility at the time that there's actually a house on the property that had been occupied when the Costas owned the property. So it's been empty for 2 or 3 years. You know, it's got some damage to it now, and it needs to be held up. When we got to the site, I pointed out to Tom that, you know, there's your new offices, Tom. You know, Tom Aubin was part of the group that went out there. And I said, there's your new, you know, administrative offices sitting right there. They literally could move in there, but it would still cost quite a lot of money to fix it up so that it would be habitable. But that didn't go over very well. Anyway, as a result, that property would be torn down. The house would be torn down if they ever went ahead with the plans that they have. But the plans are very preliminary, and we've got a lot of meetings to go. A lot will depend on what happens with the other school. So there's really not anything to report other than we're moving along with that. We're actually checking to see if the National Guard, believe it or not, does a lot of ground clearing, a lot of clear cutting and lot clearance for municipalities. And so that would save a lot of money in the long run if they were to be able to take that on. So they're going to just look into that to see if it's the type of project that they would do. But that was kind of bad. The other one is
you're talking about the house in the front as soon as you go in.
No, it's back a little ways. It's back a little ways in the property. It's actually a 2-family house. There's a small apartment in the basement in addition to a house up top. But I think there was a hole in the roof. I mean, it's in pretty bad repair right now.
So who owns the property at the front when you go in?
That still belongs, I believe, to the Costa family. That particular house was carved out.
Oh, okay.
It's not until you get down the driveway. So from the driveway in is what the town owns.
Okay.
Okay, so then the other committee that I was involved with is the one that you've probably all read about, and also very preliminary regarding the disposition of the school. There were basically 3 proposals that were put in front of the long-term building committee. One was to sell the school outright. The expected value of that, now this was done lower interest rates in a different economic environment, because this appraisal was done 6-8 months ago, was roughly $10 to $11 million. The current feeling is that if anybody had any interest at all, they would have already been knocking on the door. So that's still a possibility. As soon as you start backing out realtor fees, whether or not you really could get 10 million and the replacement cost for additional things, you kind of net out still negative, probably $2 or $3 million. If we were to keep the property but knock the school down, so we wouldn't have to maintain the school, the cost for demolition for that school and removal of all of it is probably in the $3 to $4 million range. So we're still out $3 to $4 million to come up with the money to maintain the land. As sellable lots, if there were a builder that was interested in buying those lots, they would be facing that same $3 to $4 million cost of demoing the property, and you could only get about 16 lots out of it because the whole backside behind those fields is all wet. So those are not buildable lots. You could get about 16 lots out of it. So if it costs somebody $3 million to remove it, they're not going to pay very much for the land. So that was one option. The third option is to combine offices, including highway department, including council on aging, including recreation, schools, the whole shebang, into the school. The problem that you run into is that once you change the primary use of the facility from an educational facility to one that's not geared towards education, you have to meet all these building codes, and means sprinkler, boiler, there's all kinds of things that would have to be done. The current estimate of that is about $500 a square foot. And it would be somewhere in the range of $25 to $30 million. If they were to renovate, the problem that lies here is that both the annex and the town hall have got to be dealt with at some point. And we're not saying it has to be next year, but within the next 5 years, something significant has to be done to upgrade. You know, the water is not drinkable there. There's so many repair issues that are going on in both of those buildings that we keep spending a lot of money. The highway department needs some renovation at the shed. The shed is falling down. So there's a lot of money that's going to have to be spent on things that you'd still end up with a bunch of cobbled together buildings. So there is a thought, and initially it was not impressed. It did impress everyone, but by the time the discussion was over, all members of the committee, and I will tell you that if you watch the tape, I did exclude myself from being a member of the finance committee as voting, that I was voting as an individual because I did not have consensus from the committee, so I could not vote as a representative of the finance committee, and I didn't want anyone to think that it was a representation of our view on it. But that to take it to the townspeople to see, is this a building we would like to save? I mean, the town has poured tens and tens of millions of dollars into this building. And there was a new roof put on not that long ago. It's solar ready. There's a lot of life left in that building, far greater than what's left in the remainder. The Council on Aging needs additional space. They've run out of space. She's always crying for additional recreation space. So there's a lot of needs in the town overall to be able to have a central location, a community center, the school administration building. When you start thinking about all the boxes that would check off, it doesn't seem like it's a crazy idea. It's an expensive idea. There's no question about that. And will the townspeople pay for that? Don't know. But it's up to the townspeople to decide whether or not that is something that they would want to put their money on. If they don't, then fine, we would have to cobble together some of these other things. But the select board did agree that they would like to hear from the townspeople, and whether it's in the form of a non-binding question on the ballot in April, or it's a townwide survey or something, somehow or other they want to get a consensus from people in town as to lay out these options as to what they want to have done with the school. There are a lot of people that, went through that school, graduated from the school. Is it something that they want to keep, or is it something we should just get rid of? It really is much more centrally located than the current town hall. And the current town hall probably has more value on the market than the high school does, because it's a smaller parcel that a developer would be far more interested in, even for senior housing or other type of housing that could be converted into that. So we'll see. I mean, Gary, you kind of went through that in Dartmouth. I mean, as far as, whether they were going to repurpose the school for town buildings or not. You have a much bigger set of offices that you needed to satisfy. But the other question is, when if they do renovate the current town hall, there isn't a single place in town you could put all of those people for 18 months. I don't know where town hall would go for 18 months if once they renovated the town hall, because it would have to be vacated. So they're not even really sure how that would even take place. So there's a lot of questions. Nothing is certainly set in stone, but there are a lot of issues that need to be considered and thought out in a much more detailed manner. But that's kind of the lay of the land currently.
Thanks, Cindy. Hugh, go ahead. You've got your hand up. Thanks, Cindy, for that update. You're muted.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
I would view it very, very cautiously. Cindy made an excellent report. If the guessing is 25 to 30 million. It's sort of like the old saying that no plan of operation in a military fashion survives contact with the enemy. We've an inflationary environment. You then, taking your 25 to 30, you then have, what do you do with what, 4 or 5 then obsolete buildings that need to be dealt with in some fashion, going from 1 to 4 or 5. I think you're going to find that there's a fair amount of affection for the existing buildings, like the town hall. At one point, there was a suggestion the library would be included. That may not be the case now, but if so, there are a lot of people who would be opposed to that, I'm sure. And I think it just is an open money pit. There are suggestions about things that need to be done. I think you can do an awful lot of fixing up all the things that are being talked about at far less than $30 million or so. But you're right, it can be explored. It would require, it's going to happen bonding, which is going to take a 2/3 vote. It's going to require an exclusion, which would take a vote of the town. And if the town wishes to do that, yeah, but when I came on the FinCom a number of years ago, there wasn't much in the way of debt. That's no longer the case. We just have, what, 50 million for the high school, and cumulative, the others aren't so great, but that's a big one. You had a lot. Well, anyway, I said my piece. I think it is highly questionable, but it's something that should be played out and see where things go.
Yeah. Thank you, Hugh. I guess, you know, I think obviously there's a lot more to go through. I guess what I'd like to see is, okay, if there's 3 scenarios that you discussed, right? Put the pros and cons and kind of come to, if it's this and if this is a challenge, how would we address it? And I think we just seem to be in this endless circle of there's so many things to come into play and nothing really progresses ahead with the plan. And and while I appreciate the select board wanting to get a pulse of the town, which I think is important, I think the question becomes, how will that question be asked? Because if it's, do you want to keep the high school?
Oh, sure.
And the answer is absolutely. But you want to keep the high school, and if so, are you willing to pay X dollars more in your real estate bill every year? That's, it has to be, in my opinion, if you're going to ask, do you want to keep the school, there has to be a financial implication that's with it. Because otherwise you're going to get that survey is going to be 80% of the town says, yes, we want to keep the school. See, so we have to keep it. And, I think it's important to understand the financial implications of it.
When the select board addressed this at their meeting a couple of weeks ago, they said exactly that they would lay out 3 scenarios with the price tags of each one and the impact of each one, so that people could choose what their preference would be. Once again, in a non-binding fashion, but they could choose what their preference would be, just to get a little bit more of a consensus of what the thought is out there.
But do you think they'll have enough information even if it's potentially an April non-binding or a May timeframe? Will there be enough time to work through all of the questions that still need to be answered?
You mean at the same time that we're going to try to address potentially an override and address water and sewer issues on Route 6? You think we could address all 3 of these things in the space of 5 months from now? Big question. Don't know. I mean, the time is of the essence only because it costs a couple $100,000 to $300,000 a year to just keep the school there. So, if we wait another year, what the cost of that is about $200,000. The school is willing to pick up a certain amount of maintenance costs for that, but the liability insurance and maintenance of the grounds costs about a couple $100,000 a year. So there is no sense of urgency to it, but it costs money to just have it sit there. So that's really the only reason why it should be sooner rather than later. But there is a very extensive document that breaks down all of the costs. I mean, in great detail, right down to all of the building design work and whatnot that this engineering firm did, this architectural firm did, as well as the appraisal firm. I do not have it in electronic form. I'm sure we can get it in electronic form. I'd be happy to forward it to you. It's about 30 pages. So
I think it's on the town website.
is it okay? So
I think so.
I haven't looked for it there, but so there's an extensive design, plan there that outlines all of those things. But yeah, it's a lot to throw at everyone, and it's problematic if we're also talking about an override question being put out there next spring. I mean, it's good and it's bad in that people should know what some of the other factors are that the town is facing. But timing is everything, right? I mean, it sounds like it's an awful lot, and so it will be easy to say no, but maybe for the wrong reasons. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Buzzy, you have your hand up. Thanks again, Cindy.
Yeah. I think maybe we need to think beyond the possibility of having a question on the ballot. Cindy and others have already pointed out how meaningless a vote's going to be without some specifics about what it's going to cost and what the uses might be. And you may want the town to vote on a use as well, because some of them they might be willing to pay for and others they may not. I wonder whether it might not be a good idea to try to promote some town discussion by having people go to meetings of various civic organizations and arranging perhaps meetings in various parts of town where people have an opportunity to not only hear what the problems and ideas are, but to ask questions and react and make suggestions. So it's a little more thoughtful. Maybe eventually we put 1, 2, or 3 questions on the ballot, but I think there's got to be some sort of two-way education before that's done.
Thank you, Buzzy. Hugh?
I have no quarrel with what Buzzy's saying. That sounds fine. I just had 2 comments. Remember, we're in an inflationary environment, which is going ahead. That means these figures are subject to reconsideration on a regular basis. Remember, the original bids for the high school were estimated by the architect and so forth were way out of what was actually able to be financed. The second point is, I think that the maintenance of the present building becomes an attractive nuisance. The figure I heard, it may not be accurate, but earlier was the town functions that would be consolidated there would take about 20% of the space. There's a lot of people, I don't mean to denigrate them, but see this as potentially free space for nonprofits, this, that, and the other thing. So that you not only have the renovation, you also have the potential of a lot of maintenance for a lot of things, which may be well intended, but the town really can't afford to get into that market. So I'm just saying one more caution about it. That's all.
Thanks, Hugh. Gary?
So I go back to the reason why we built the school to begin with, the new school, was that this building in its present state, let alone about 2 or 3 years ago, was pretty much uninhabitable. So what will it cost the residents in Westport to make this building, if we want to keep the same footprint that it's in now, habitable for the employees that work for this town? That's going to come at some cost. So, is it better to maybe use this property as a mixed use location where we put in some residential? We may put in, I don't know if it's zone commercial. We have some commercial use in there. We can derive some tax benefit off of it as far as assessment is concerned. But I think we really have to, and I know that you has pointed this out, and some other people have pointed out, but we really got to be concerned with people's bills increasing, because they got the fire department, they got the police department, they've got the school now. They're looking at what they're going to do with the campground. This is all adding to people's bills. And, you know, I get that we want to move forward with a lot of this, but we've got to be cognizant that the more we ask and the more aggressive we are all at once, the more the inclination is for people to say no. So I think even April is kind of too soon to do this. I wouldn't want to see anything proposed unless we know exactly what the costs are. We are definitely in an inflationary period. It might be better if we wait 2 years to do this. The cost may be down, maybe a little bit more attractive to people to go ahead and vote on something. But I think now, if we're asking for all these different buckets, it's like we don't even have the override. We don't even have the number for an override, but yet we're now talking about a $15 million project. I think we got to pick you know, what we feel is the most appropriate item right now for town to get us by. And I feel it's the override, and then worry about this building. It's expensive now to keep people there. We get it. But maybe there's a solution of adding on to the current high school, the new school. Maybe we add an administration wing to that. What does that cost? $2 million maybe. To me, it's a little bit better than spending $15 million on a project, or even talking about it when we really don't even know what the end game is. So I don't even know if it's mixed use. Is that a mixed use lot? Can we even?
The zoning right now, I'm sure that could always be dealt with. The zoning right now is residential in that area. But it does, you know, that's kind of the least of the worries. That actually was discussed, even to include housing on the first floor. That to have, because that was another alternative, but they don't have the funding, and they really didn't need anywhere near close to the whole building, was the senior housing. Some additional senior housing, because the only senior housing available is what's up on Route 6, and that's been there for many, many, many years. So to expand on the senior housing, to renovate some of that, and you know, there's a lot of grants available and whatnot for that. So a lot of these questions were definitely explored and would be included. They were part of the discussion. So yeah, I mean, the only thing that brings it up to the present time is the cost each year that it takes to maintain the building. And I think just a full disclosure issue that if we are to do an override, I think it would be in the town's best interest to make sure that people understand other things that are out there potentially. I mean, you know, I think that transparency, I think, would be a key factor to any type of vote, whether it be for an override or the school or, you know, for the water and sewer project. So,
yeah, I mean, if we envisioned like a mixed use project there, something that's like down the road on Main Road, like the cottages or whatever, and some
Right.
commercial retail space in the front where you've got a main highway that could attract that. I think that that's a win-win. We're going to collect tax off that. We're going to, you know, we're going to satisfy housing, which the town desperately needs more housing. Who
Right.
doesn't? So I think these things are all going to be explored. I haven't seen any of the meetings, but like I said, I wouldn't want us to go ahead and jump the gun, even make a recommendation on something that is
Right.
very preliminary. You know?
Right. We don't have anything to make a recommendation on it at this time.
I appreciate the work that the committee's done. I mean, it's
Yeah.
obviously it's going to be a lot of eye openers. There's going to be a lot of, I guess, you know, discussion between now and whenever it comes to fruition, whatever that is.
Well, thank you, Cindy, for that. That's a lot of committee updates that you yourself have. Thank you. Does anyone else have any committees that they're on that are active and have anything financial to discuss? Hugh, go ahead.
Yeah, it isn't really. I talked to Pete Keller here, but basically waiting for more information to start developing a real budget to be discussed. But it's premature at this point.
Sure. Thank you. I think the one committee that I'd like to hear from, but we don't presently have anyone here tonight, is the infrastructure committee. Bob had started on the committee, and then hasn't been able to attend meetings. And I think Lawrence was going to be on the committee, but we haven't seen Lawrence in the last 2 meetings. So we're missing some updates. And I think there's a lot of things happening in that committee. We just need to get caught up on that. From what I understand, there may be a warrant article coming on the town meeting for something. So it'd be kind of good to start understanding what the framework of that is. But
Which, Karen, that committee is what's their charge?
They're called the Infrastructure Committee, but they're, I guess, specifically focused now on the water and sewer on Route 6. So I don't know if the committee is also designed to discuss other infrastructure things at some other time, but there is expected to be a warrant article for water and sewer at the town meeting.
Senator Rodericks was at the last meeting of that group, and I had watched it, and I think his issue was that just like many of the other federal programs, there will be a lot of money available, and it's a question of whether the town is in a position to ask for some of that money. You know, this whole shovel ready that we learned about back when back in the recession funding money, when that came along, is to be ready to have your plans ready, to have everything ready to go, so that if there is some federal money available, I shouldn't even say if, the way he kind of phrased it is when the federal money is available and when some state money is available, we would be at least in a position to try to get some of that. So I think that's what the push is for. I didn't get the sense that they're looking for a tremendous amount of money. This is not to fund the whole project. We've got ARPA money that's funding a lot of it already. But I have no idea how much it is they're looking for. But I got the sense that it's not a lot for this go round anyway.
Thank you. Hugh, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, from other sources, I've been told that there were 2 other projects other than the Route 6 project. One is Cadman's Neck, and the other was the lead in terms of basically septic system, so forth and so on. This is not guaranteed. It's from a pretty good source, I think, but that the Cadman's Neck area turned out not to be interested, and the lead people are interested. Now, where that goes in terms of further development, we'll find out. So I think those are projects that were part of the list of the things who are being under consideration.
Oh, you mean the committee itself was discussing those projects as well?
There were, I think so, but it's, I say, it's not
Oh,
nothing,
okay.
nothing secret about it, but the person who
Right,
seemed well informed was not necessarily part of the committee.
right. Okay. Gary, thank you, thank you, Hugh. Gary.
So, this might be a question for Nicole. How much money have we received for ARPA? No, ARPA, this is, we're talking about ARPA. And from the county and from the federal government. And have we drawn down any of those projects? Has the select board voted on any of those projects? Do you know what the balance is? Do we have anything left over? Can we get an update on that if you have it? I mean, I don't know if you have it off the top of your head, but.
I don't. I know that we have received the federal money in 2 payments, which
Yeah.
was I want to say 1.6 million. And then we have some projects that have been approved by Bristol County. We did get some money, approximately like 350,000. And I know there's some other projects. Jim, he's been the key on submitting all the projects to Bristol County. I can get you balances as to what we have and what we've done. I can prepare something and get it out to you guys.
Yeah, I think that'd be good to.
Right.
Yeah, I think that would be good to see. And not only that, Nicole, I think these projects that are being drawn down for Bristol County, these are obviously projects that the Board of Selectmen have voted on, because we can't draw down on those funds unless the Board of Selectmen have voted on those projects.
Yes.
So, right. So yeah, that would be great if we could see like a list of where we are, I guess, and how much is left. And because we don't, in my, this is only my opinion, we don't want to be like 2020, knocking on the door on New Year's Eve, and then all of a sudden they say, oh yeah, by the way, time's up, you can't use any more of the money, then the federal government pulls it all back. Even if we're not shovel ready per se, I'm sure that the highway department and there's other departments in town can creatively think of ways to put this in front of the select board to use. And, you know, if we can do it, let's do it. Why not?
I think Gary's point also is when's the deadline is important.
The what?
When is the deadline? I think that's a very good point.
2024.
Yeah, 2024.
Okay,
And you have to have it committed by 2024, but spent by 2026.
yeah, okay.
So just for the edification of the group, so there is a ARPA committee that is it's not any kind of official committee, but it's a group. Karen meets with them, I meet with them. It's about once a month now that reviews the projects that have been submitted. So it's member of the planning board, Karen, myself, Shauna, Jim, I believe Nicole, you're part of that group. So there's Dick Brewer. So there's, several of us that look at the projects that have been submitted to use that funding. So Jim has a very good spreadsheet that he's been keeping track of that I'm sure Nicole will be able to tap into to keep track of. The Bristol County money has to be specifically approved by the county. So you cannot just spend it for what you think might be allowed and then submit it to Bristol County. You have to get approval in advance for the Bristol County funds. The state funds, the other state funds, we have a $10 million, I should say the communities have a $10 million kind of free zone, if you will. We could treat up to $10 million as whether or not you lost any revenue during COVID, but they're giving you a $10 million buffer and say, okay, up to 10 million, you can spend this however you would like or however you feel fit. So the select board has been very specific as to how they have been approaching these things as to whether or not they would fit the guidelines. Initially, the guidelines were pointing far more towards infrastructure needs or COVID-related type projects. And by and large, they have stuck with that. All of the funds have not been committed. I don't know what the balance is. Nicole can get that for us, but it's been a very, it's been a regular process. So the select board is following a process and they've been pretty much sticking to that as to what the specific needs are out of the ARPA funds. Karen, would you say that that's about right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't attended any meetings in a while because I have got really busy at work. But yes, I would say that they're trying to hold the dollars for the intent for infrastructure and not try to spend them on miscellaneous items that aren't infrastructure related, because then there'll be no dollars left for the intent was for the infrastructure. So yes, so I think if you pay any attention and watch any select board meetings, you'll see every month or so there's items that are on the agenda for approval, and the committee makes a recommendation and then it's presented in front of the full select board and then select board votes on it. So yeah, so a very formal and open and very transparent process. Any other committee things, or we can keep on moving? We'll keep on moving. So the second item on the agenda was the fiscal 24 budget planning. Unfortunately, Jim Hartnett was not able to be here tonight because that would have been to get a good sense from him and where he's at. But he provided us a timetable, and it looks like sometime in early December we should have some numbers, and we will be starting our budget process in the December process right into January, and I'll redistribute that schedule that I put together with our dates, and then I need to circle back with our department heads to actually get in their time slots so we can get them scheduled. But I'd say next meeting, we should have some good, we should be getting close to seeing where things are going to be with the budget.
Karen, has he sent out the memo? Budget memo?
We can ask Nicole. I have not
Yes.
seen it.
The budget memo went out. All the budgets were due October 28th. And he has met with some departments. He's meeting with the departments to go over their budget. I know he's met with me, and Sue. I think they like some of the town hall budget, departments, but yeah, he's working on that. He's, getting there.
Can we get a copy of the memo?
Yeah, I'll find it and forward it to you. I'm sure I have it in my email somewhere. And I just forwarded you the ARPA spreadsheet, but I don't have
Okay.
the 2 new members' email. So if you want to pass it on to them.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
great.
you, Nicole. Yeah, so I think I'm going to try to meet with Jim at some point. I'll jump into town hall and kind of talk to him where things are at. But I would expect at the December meeting, we should have a good discussion on where we're heading in with the budget. So I think all reports, it's not going to be a wonderful year. So we'll say that in terms of how the budget's going to prepare. So, just the recap, we ended our fiscal 23 budget not in balance and using free cash and having to use some free cash to balance the budget. And we're not expecting, as we discussed last year, any significant revenues or any significant changes. We're anticipating inflation is driving up the expenses. And so that's just going to put a lot more pressure on this budget to balance it. So no surprises coming to us. Gary, you have your hand up.
Do we have the latest revenue numbers?
Nicole, do you have anything?
Or when's the last posted revenues that we have? I guess that's budget to actual. Do we have any of those?
Nicole, you're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
I sent out receipts not that long ago for June 30th. I haven't done one since then. I'll find that email and send it again. I also had sent turnbacks. I think because Cindy, you had mentioned yesterday you have the turnbacks. I gave you those.
Right. Right. I have not forwarded them. I will
Okay.
forward them with your permission, Nicole. Is that okay if I forward them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll find local receipts. I know I had sent it out. But I will send it again.
Okay. Do you have up until like September?
I haven't put the first quarter of 23 together yet, but I can. Like I said, I've been working on the balance sheet and the recap and everything. So, but I can put that.
Yeah.
I'll put that together this week and send it out.
Yeah, because I think that'll be a good indication of where we are right now. In the scheme of things of, because the revenues are going to be important, especially if we've drawn back on free cash. And if the trend continues from last year, let's see what fiscal 23 brings. I mean, nobody knows. I mean, obviously motor vehicle will be a big question mark because the first commitment hasn't gone out yet, but at least it'll give a good sense for like all the miscellaneous stuff, building and whatnot.
Mhm.
Yep, I'll work on that this week and send that out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see building because I'm curious to see out of COVID. We did pretty good, I guess, during COVID. People were home and everything, but going out of COVID, what did the building receipts look like? Building, plumbing, gas, electrical. Did that decrease? We saw a little bit of a decrease here, but I think that was expected because, like I said, people were building because they were home and they could do projects. But now with double-digit inflation and mortgage rates higher, who knows if that's going to decrease? It'll be interesting.
Yep. Well, we'll be getting to it really soon. So
Yes.
as the committee knows, and Zach, you're new, but it's almost time for us to kick it in gear and get really busy. So here we go. So just quickly on that point, so since Tracy is no longer part of the committee, the school will need a liaison, a finance committee liaison. And that's a big one. That's a very important one for us to have. And I don't know if there's anybody that's would be jumping up that would want to be the liaison on that. We don't need to decide tonight, but we would have to decide pretty soon as the budgets go in. I think Hugh, you're muted. I think you're speaking.
I could think of some liaisons who would run a risk of being shot. So we might take our time to think about it.
Right. Okay. Well, we can, we've got another month, and maybe, we'll get another committee member
Mhm.
and maybe we can, juggle things around. I certainly wouldn't want to have a new committee member take on the school.
Maybe they can be like a maybe they can be like a or two, or.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Buzzy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think this is obvious and didn't need to be pointed out, but out of an abundance of caution, I think we should talk to Tracy and see what recommendations she may have. She may have a recommendation for a new committee member who would be ideal for doing the job.
Sure.
By the way, I just forwarded everyone the turn back list.
Great. Thank you.
Karen, can
so-
can I ask one more question on the revenue
Yeah.
just quickly?
Sure.
Have we realized, maybe Nicole, have we realized any revenue on the new marijuana facility yet?
No. It,
Is it-
Well,
it
Also,
just
it's
opened.
medical, right?
And well, it just opened and it's only open for medical. There's a sign that says recreation is coming. They're not,
Oh.
they haven't started the recreation portion of it and we don't make any money until the recreation is up and running.
So did we plug monies in the FY23 budget
No.
in anticipation? We didn't. Okay, good.
We weren't allowed to.
Right,
DOR had sent out a memo that said
Yes,
that
right.
we're not allowed to estimate until it's up and running for at least 6 months.
right, because we never had those revenues before, so how can you estimate on revenues you never had?
Correct. And we probably will not estimate for fiscal 24, depending on when it gets started.
Right.
So if they don't get started before January, we probably won't use it for the FY24 budget as well.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Welcome.
Great, thank you. So just, so until we figure out, the school liaison, I'll reach out and be a quasi interim liaison. And I'll reach out to the school at least to get our budget, dates set. So I'll reach out on that. Okay, so, Cindy, go ahead.
So Karen, do you anticipate that we're going to send out a similar letter as we did last year to the department heads, asking them to submit their ideal dates that they want to meet with us? Are we going to decide that at the next meeting?
No, we talked about that at the last meeting and I was gonna do the same thing and
Okay.
send that it's a Google Calendar and they get to pick their date.
Right,
The only exception would be, to probably just pencil in the school to be the last possible date that we have, which I think was an early February date. So, I wouldn't even extend that to anyone else to be able to do.
right,
So we can leave that. So,
right.
yeah,
Okay.
so I just need to get into my Google thing and send it out to everybody, but yes. Same thing. I think that worked very well. People responded to it pretty quickly and we only had to move a couple of things around where a couple of meetings were a little too heavy and a couple were too late. So, and then we'll leave room again for, if there's a cancellation that we didn't anticipate to kind of give us a little space. Okay, so the next item on the agenda we've already talked about, which was the fiscal 22 information. So we asked about revenue and free cash and where we're at. And so I think we already got that update. So I can pass along that. Item 4 was the override discussion. not much else to say at this point. We're on hold, and we'll know more once our budget starts to come together, and we go from there. The next item is the minutes of October 11th, 2022. They were distributed to us, and if anybody would like to make a motion to approve those, I would entertain that.
So move.
Any second?
Second,
Thank you. Any discussion on those at all? Nope. So I'll do a roll call vote. Gary?
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy?
Aye.
Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Zach?
Aye.
Buzzy?
aye.
And Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. And topics for next meeting, just let me know as we go along if there's anything that comes up. Our next meeting is scheduled for the second Tuesday of December, and I have received no correspondence. So does anyone else have anything else they want to bring up?
Karen, can we just go back to the override for a second? I know that there was
We sure
a committee, right? There was a committee that's organized. Now, this committee, from what I'm understanding from the last meeting, was it's really not a committee of a voting committee or a town. It's just a bunch of folks that have gotten together like a think tank to maybe think it through. So, I was thinking about this, and it's kind of like we're almost caught in a quagmire in the fact that we want to maybe promote a override, but yet we're held to the fact that we can't. Like, the people that really want to be able to push this through can't. So we have to rely on an outside source to do this. So I guess the most difficult piece of this is bridging that gap, and I think that's what really we need to really figure out as a committee, and not only just this committee, but any other committee that wants to push it through, department heads, select board, whatever. So I think that's where most of the thinking is going to be on our end, is trying to, we don't want to be stuck in limbo, and we don't want to just keep talking about it and having all these different ideas. We really need to be able to know the strategy to push this forward. And I don't really think so. I mean,
Gary, that's exactly where that committee is at right now, is that they're on the brink of putting all of their information to bring it to the select board, so that the select board will have what that consensus is, and then put together an advocacy group of taxpayers, of people that will go out there and advocate for the override if they choose to do so. But we're also looking at getting some outside help, professional help, to organize that process. And so that meeting is held on Wednesdays, and we'll know more about that tomorrow. But that is exactly where that committee is at. We're done getting the information together. It's now compiling some of it and trying to decide what the best course of action is to get this moving. So the target is that by, early January, mid-January, we're ready to launch out to the townspeople to say, this is where we were, this is how we got here, this is the problem, and this is how we think it should be fixed. We haven't come up with a number because no one knows what that number is yet. At least we've gotten a couple of parts of it. But what you described is exactly where that committee is at, is that we kept going over the same things over and over again, week after week. Now we're going to do something about it. And once we get through that, then it'll be a little bit clearer.
Yeah. And once that number is publicized or whatever, we know that number to be, I think, speaking as a taxpayer, they're going to want to know exactly what we need that for. What is it going to do?
Right.
Is it
Right.
are we going to see new trucks? Are we going to see new equipment? Are we going to see more staff? That's kind of that's the selling point of this, because, as the years go on, without that staff, without that equipment, and without us being able to maintain any of this stuff, it just doesn't get easier, but I was thinking about this. I think the biggest hurdle is going to be bridging the gap from this independent committee to folks in town that are on committees and that cannot really persuade anybody one way or another. It's a very difficult task, and I'd like to see what other towns do, successful towns that have passed an override and what their strategy was. And I don't know if that's part of what your group is doing,
Right.
or the group.
Right. Buzz, do you have anything to add?
Only that that's part of what we've been doing, is looking at other towns that have been successful, talking to the people there to get some idea of what they have done to be successful.
And there aren't too many of them. There aren't too many of those towns that have been successful for operating purposes. You know, it's different when you have, you know, capital expenditure. Debt overrides are far easier to, debt exclusions are far easier than overrides. So overrides do not come easily, nor frequently.
Thank you. Anyone else on the override? Anything else at all? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second,
Second.
Great. We're sad that we don't have Tracy to raise our
no,
motion
Right.
anymore.
I know, she would be making a beeline for the ice cream by now.
Well, that one's in her honor tonight.
Yeah.
Again, okay, so roll call for motion. Okay, Gary,
Yes.
Cindy,
Aye.
Hugh,
Aye.
Zach,
Oh, he's muted. You're
Mouth-
muted, Zach.
Mouth open, he said yes.
Thumbs up.
Nice. All right.
great, thank you. Buzzy,
Aye.
and I know Tracy would say aye, but she's not here, and I will say aye. And thank you all. Have a great night,